Hey Neppers, it's me, One Neptune. Today, I want to look at the two new characters we added to the archives after the update. They look pretty bonkers, so let's get started. Okay, so the first character we'll look at is Mizuzumi Aya. She is a green character and she is a support character, kind of like a bard, I guess. She has a musical instrument, but you'll see why I say that. Her S3, Sound Guide, 4-turn cooldown. Remember, this is all a max lattice, max prowess, and everything like that. So this is a, whale-like character in terms of, investment, for the preview. But, so, S3, it's an AoE push. So, increases all allies' turn meter by 40% and reduces all enemies' shell and skill cooldown by a turn. Which is really, really strong. So 40% on an AoE push is pretty bonkers, right? And I'm assuming this means everybody but herself, so she doesn't get the reduction, and you'll see why I don't think that in a second here. But whenever a unit dies, reduces shell's cooldown by 2 turns. I think this means allies and enemies, right? So this 4-turn cooldown becomes a 2-turn cooldown. And if the skill is off cooldown, increase her turn meter by 80%. So almost an extra turn. So pretty nuts right there. You see here that level 5 is reduced by a turn. Otherwise, 5 turns is pretty long, right? And the turn meter boost, 40. So this is like a max skill over here. So pretty lattice hungry right now for this one. But what else does she do? Her S2 is a passive, Whirling Vortex, and at the start of each of her turns, she purifies the debuff effect from all allies, right? And then heals them for 50% of the max HP upon successful purification. So this is a thing where I'm not positive exactly if you have to have actually been cleansed to be healed, right? Based on wording, that's what I think it means. So let's say you have no debuffs and you take your turn here and this goes off, but no cleansing happened, you don't get healed, right? So not positive, again, based on wording, that's what I think it means, but really strong against debuffers, obviously, especially when it seems like she can cycle pretty quickly. Also, because of this right here and how this wants no cooldown, well, her S1, know what it does? It has a chance to decrease her shell cooldown and skill cooldown by sorry, not shell, just her skill cooldown by a turn. So yeah, I mean, it's only a 25% chance, but if you build it pretty fast, you'll get a lot of chances to reduce the cooldown overall, which is really strong. And because she only has, this is all out of skill cooldown, I mean, she only has 1 cooldown, but yeah, and this other thing too, though, hidden at max, lattice, like this passive here, also, can trigger when unable to be act, also under max lattice. So this is like, a max lattice looking character right here. And for a support unit, that is kind of annoying because the two main SR supports for healing, stuff like that, for cleansing, stuff like that, Ling and Fusho and the they work with relatively low lattice. Of course, other ones like Mia and the ones that have more offensive oomph, and more supporting roles like that, they need more lattice, obviously. But it's not really common at the moment to have a support character to be so lattice hungry, unfortunately, and it looks like this character will be. Okay, now then though, do I think the character is going to be good? Yes, I think. Now, you might look at this, so wow, it's how is she not going to be good? These skills look insane, right? And the S3 looks really nuts, right? The thing is, though, is that it's hard for me to tell where I would put her. Obviously, anti-CC. So I maybe just like Plume, you know, you just cleanse stuff off like that, and maybe gain enough momentum that way. I don't know about that. She's definitely more something like used against like stuns or sleeps or things like that. There's a chance, you know, it should be okay for like, you know, a anti-cleave where you are finding something that wants to CC you first, and then like she can cut it, take a turn, and like cleanse you, and you know, and you get rid of like the status effects, something like that, so you can actually do what you want to. I don't know, something like that. Maybe in like pseudo offensive teams, not pseudo, but like, you know, kind of offensive teams where you want to like get kills quickly, but you're not quite a cleave team or something, because I'm not sure she's like great in cleave. Yeah, you see like this 2-meter push by 40%, but she doesn't actually give you any actual offensive boost. And in those cases, let's say you push everybody and then your, you know, DPS goes and does whatever it wants to do, but without an offensive boost, you're doing like not enough damage to get through some of the more dedicated like anti-cleave setups, and then you're just pushing, you know, everybody else's units with like Lighthouse and stuff like that, and I don't think that would actually work. Now, if somehow you can set it up where you can do like enough damage to do it, you know, set your turns like perfectly somehow, where the enemy team, you know, on their whatever that you're on doesn't cut you, you know, great, right? You probably won, but in that situation, that's probably more of a gear gap than her doing whatever. So I don't know, like the S3, obviously, very very strong, like pretty bonkers. But her main like role does seem to be like anti like CC, like anti debuffing, and if that doesn't have that, then like I don't know, like almost half her kit seems to be like kind of wasted, overall, which is not the best thing, right? Just it seems like a meta call overall. Like if she came out in the middle of like last season, I would say, wow, this is an amazing character, right? Because there was like not a ton of CC, but enough where a character like this would be very welcome. But because CC got hit so hard in the balance patch, I'm a little more tentative on how like universally good this character will be. I do think she will find a place in the meta, but I'm not like 100% sold quite yet, especially on a character that looks like will need like 555 to be effective in battle. So, you know, before she comes out, this is something where definitely wait and see, have other people test her out before you like invest into her, despite how nuts this S3 seems to be. The other character is Kokardi, and he is a red unit. So, what does he do? Well, his S3, it is an AoE, does damage, and it gives him a crit rate buff, and applies 3 stacks of Calamity Flame to himself. It also increases the 2-meter by 35%, which is pretty nuts also. Like, all this in one skill is like pretty, you know, pretty bonkers. Now, what is Calamity Flame? Well, glad you asked. So, it's a special buff he has, and it increases the indirect damage added by Flame Strike, you know, per stack. So, each stack increases to 1.5% of the target's max HP, not exceeding 20% of his current attack, and can stack 16 times. Cannot be dispelled. So, basically, does more damage, the more HP the enemy has. And this is max HP. So, and it stacks pretty high. So, it only triggers when he scores a crit. And then we'll deal, you know, the Flame Strike attack based on max HP. Shells will trigger this. And after every 2 actions, he deals, you know, damage to all enemies, increases all allies' turn meter by 20%, and applies the crit rate buff to himself, right? So basically, he continually has. Wait, I actually don't know if this is just to himself or all allies. Not really clear there. And it also gets more stats of Calamity Flame, which is pretty nuts, right? So more Calamity Flame means more true damage overall. And a single target attack, just adds more, Calamity Flame and boost the effects, stuff like that. So, a typical S1 like you would expect from a character like this. Now, I'm interested in how this effect... Also, I forgot to tell you that the topic here says is that he cannot be targeted if there's an ally that's alive, which is basically stealth. It turns off if he's like controlled, like stunned, sleep, something like that. But, that's also a pretty nuts thing. So he just can't like burst him down overall, which is, really strong. But one thing I'm not sure about is this Calamity Flame like a resource, or is it just like a buff he stacks up, right? Because in Rahu's abilities, it says consume the stacks, right, to do his things. In this one, it doesn't say that. It does not say consume, which would lead me to believe that, you just get this, and you keep getting it, and that's it. Which is pretty nuts, because that means this would stack incredibly quickly. And that seems really bonkers, right? That's like in long fights especially, because he definitely seems to be suited as a bruiser killer for like longer fights, if you can get the right stats on him. If it's a, what do you call it, a resource more like Rahu's, he's still really good, right? Just like less good. I definitely think though that because his, like, unlike the other character, Aya, his, like, of course as a DPS you're gonna want more abilities, like more lattice to increase his damage. But it seems like here the S3, where his speed is, right? So maybe we get more speed on him because he has to actually do attacks to get more skill ups. So maybe 4 there, which is unfortunate because besides that, his S3 is like probably his least important skill. His S2, you want the crit rate, right, for the bonus crit rate. But you probably don't have to get his max one. And his S1, you probably want to get the damage boost here. So I would say his S1, also the attack boost too. So still like probably a 544 at minimum. But maybe you can get by with even less on him. It's not like anything super important is locked behind lattices, stuff like that. So he might be a character, if you're looking for like a anti-bruiser DPS, that is relatively safe to, test out and invest in. I say relatively safe. Obviously, with the way lattices are right now, it's always best to just wait and see. Have other people test for you, stuff like that. Somebody like me, or one of like content creators, something like that, right? But he definitely seems like he could be really good for that anti-bruiser, longer fight play style. Probably not suited for anything else. Doesn't really have any real like defensive capabilities or the like, which is the only like I would say danger here, is that because he is a attack, somebody who needs like attack to do things, that maybe he'll be like a little bit too squishy, or maybe his overall like damage might be a little bit lower than he wanted to be. We'll have to see how gearing and everything like works out when he comes out, but looks very promising. Alright, and that's all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, a like, comment, and subscription would be appreciated. Anyway, I'm Wild Neptune. It's been a good one. Till next time.